Hey, it's been a while, and I kind of wanted to address that a little bit, and as to why this channel is so different. This used to be a channel just about keyboards. That was the hobby that I found during the COVID-19 pandemic, and the quarantine ended and life continued, and so did mine. But I still am really interested in keyboards as a hobby, and I got so into keyboards as a hobby, making custom mechanical keyboards, that this channel has evolved, and so have my hobbies, to the point where this is so about keyboards, it's no longer about keyboards. As you can tell from the title of this video, this is about me buying a used 3D printer. It's not my first 3D printer, and this isn't my first foray into something like 3D printing. This is my third 3D printer, and I have been printing a lot of things. I've been making keyboards and stuff like that. And the reason why these two things seem to be connected to me, keyboards and 3D printing, was because of, I think, the question that every custom mechanical keyboard enthusiast asks at some point is, wouldn't it be great for me to make my own keyboard from scratch exactly the way I want it? And that's led to something like this guy right here. Here's a prototype of a keyboard that really resonates with me, and it's a split keyboard. This is just a prototype. There's no electronics in here, it doesn't work, but the casing and the things that are holding in the switches and keycaps were 3D printed by me. And that's kind of where this rabbit hole started. I was, still continuing making keyboards. I wasn't uploading videos of them, and I'm sorry. I could talk about more of that at another time. But there was just not a lot that I felt like was worth saying and putting online about the keyboards I was making. I mean, I really enjoy them, and at some point I'll show the ones that I've made in the interim between COVID and now. But now I do have something to say about 3D printing. I have some thoughts. I have some thoughts about the printer that was in this box. This is actually already opened. This is actually the last thing I'm shooting, and kind of the experience I've had with this particular device. So you may have been here for keyboards originally, but I hope that you're here just to hear about something that I'm interested in. And without further ado, let's talk about this printer a little bit. I also just want to preface that this video is not a introduction to something like 3D printing. There's a lot of concepts and terms that I'm going to be using that I'm probably not going to be doing a lot of explaining. I'm going to try my best to just kind of explain things, like to talk about things in casual terms, so you could kind of pick it up by context. But this definitely isn't a guide or tutorial of any kind. This is more just recording my experiences and thoughts about using a specific device. But there are really great resources for those who are interested into getting 3D printing and learning about the hobby in particular. I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos from Zach Friedman, The Next Layer, Aurora Tech does really good review videos of 3D printers, including one that's very similar to this. And yeah, there's lots of resources out there. It's a really awesome community. It's very reminiscent of what I've seen in the keyboard community, very open to sharing ideas, very sort of discerning into what people like and don't like. And yeah, I think it'll be a pretty good time. Another thing is just, I haven't been making videos in a while, and this is definitely me making YouTube videos in a much different stage in my life. So get ready for this to be a lot more kind of raw and maybe less clean and refined compared to some of the videos that were on this channel earlier. Maybe that'll change in the future if I feel like I'm reaching enough people where I should really be kind of polishing these up more. But yeah, get ready for me holding my phone like a boomer and waving it around while rambling basically about my experience with this product. All right, so just to provide a little bit of context, this is the last 3D printer I got. This is the Flashforge Adventurer 5M. There's technically a Pro variant. I just opted for the non-Pro variant, and it's a really good printer for the price. I think it falls into the more sort of budget-minded category of 3D printers, and I've been modifying it to try and improve it and to try and make it fit my needs more. And so the printer is like actually open air, but I 3D printed this enclosure that gives it a door and kind of helps block out the sound and things like that. And then you could also see on the screen that I used a community software mod to utilize firmware known as Clipper that lets you do some kind of tinkering things in terms of like configuration and stuff like that, as well as let you do other things like control the printer remotely and things like that. And this was one of the prints. This is I think the last thing that I printed on it actually, is this tortoise. And it's great. Like, it did really well, and this sort of matte PLA plastic makes this look really nice. This is meant to be a hand-carved tortoise. The issue here is if you look really carefully, I guess you don't even have to look that carefully, there is a line, because I had to glue the top half of this tortoise to the bottom half of this tortoise. And this actually isn't just the printer's fault. The software mod is a community mod, and there's just a lot of errors, and the printer is just now not as reliable than when it's in its stock setting. I can always revert it to its stock setting and its stock firmware, but that's just really something I didn't want to do. I didn't want to give up sort of the freedom to tinker and the abilities that came with modifying this printer. And so I wanted to find a printer from a company where they had kind of taken this sort of tinkerer's approach as their own sort of philosophy. I don't think Flashforge is necessarily trying to cater towards a sort of tinkering audience. I think they really wanted you to buy the machine, use it as it came out of the box, and have a pretty decent out-of-the-box experience, and not have to worry too much about trying to tweak things too much. So this leads me to finding the printer that's in the cardboard box that I was showing earlier, the Sovol SV06 plus Ace. And there's a couple reasons why this thing caught my eye. It's that the plus Ace, the plus means that it's larger. Its print area is significantly larger than the Flashforge that I have here. It's, I think, the largest 3D printer I've had. It definitely is. The first one I had was like really, really small, and it was kind of like even more budget minded. Secondly, it was made with that sort of, with open source technologies and open source standards kind of from the get-go. Sovol is trying to position themselves as the sort of open ecosystem brand for 3D printers, kind of modeling after like using open source software and kind of building around that, as well as trying to contribute back to the open source community. And I felt like that was kind of what jives with me as someone who wants to tinker and as someone who wants to get into the weeds with it. The third thing that really caught my eye was the price. It's at its listed price, it's comparable to the Flashforge Adventurer 5M in front of me. But not only that, the used price that I saw on Amazon was
30% off. So the MSRP of the Plus Ace is $300, which is already a great value, and then the used discount made it $200 just out of the box. So 30% off, that was kind of hard to ignore, and then I happened to find a $50 Amazon gift card that I got as a present for the holidays. So effectively, I was able to get a hold of an SV06 Plus Ace for half off. A $300 printer, I knocked off $100 getting it used. I knocked off another $50 with that Amazon gift card. So that made me really hop onto it, and I actually had a little bit of issues. Not necessarily an issue, but there was a delay in the shipping, and I was afraid that the package was never going to arrive. So that was a little bit of a bumpy start, but that has nothing to do with Sovol. I bought it off Amazon, and ended up showing, you saw the box. But I know, because I'm filming this bit last, I know what it was like opening this box, but you don't know yet what it was like opening this box and being like, oh, it's used. I hope there's nothing wrong with it. So you're going to see in the kind of preceding footage me opening it up, putting the printer together, kind of seeing, my thoughts during that filming session was, this thing was used. I don't know how used. Amazon said it was used very good condition. They said in their notes that the box had been damaged slightly, but there were no other notes. So I felt like there was a bit of a gamble, and I felt like that gamble was kind of driven by more anxiety when the package was delayed. The thought of it being canceled, and then just me having to go through the refund process and all that stuff. So yeah, let's see what it was like taking this quote-unquote used 3D printer out of the box. I thought this unboxing was gonna take a lot longer than that, but it seems like they just delivered it in the box that it came in, so I'm just gonna start building this thing. Alright, double checked it with the manual. It looks like all the parts are here. The only weird thing that I would see is maybe out of the ordinary is one of the rubber feet fell off the bottom, but it still was pretty sticky. I have glue. I could just glue it back on. It didn't seem like it was a catastrophic issue. There are actually some cables that do route underneath those, in those grooves on the left and right of the base. You can see there. Same thing on the bottom. There's like some flat cables, but I just kind of copied the way that it's done for all the other feet to make sure that that's routed underneath the foot. So I think that's all good. Something else to note is that all of the packaging seems to be the original packaging. So if I could focus in on these right here, they have each of the baggies for each of the screws labeled by what step you need to assemble them in. So what I'm thinking is actually either Sovol quote-unquote refurbished this used printer, or this actually wasn't used at all. I had somehow just had a damaged box. I did notice there's like a little bit damage on the outside of the cardboard box that it came in. I think you could even see that little punched hole right there. Yeah, that little yeah, you can see that little gash in the box. That's basically all of the external damage I found. Maybe some is hidden by the tape or some scuff marks, but everything inside looks fine. So fingers crossed, let's hope this works when I turn it on or put it together. Alright, looks like assembly is all complete. It took me, on the recording, at least I saw, a solid 45 minutes, but I was taking it really slow. I was making sure that everything was kind of there, just double checking, making sure that this used product wasn't missing anything. There were some parts where it was just getting some screw holes aligned and stuff like that. The hardest thing was, well, not the hardest thing, but something that was a little bit difficult was actually the power plug. There's a power connector to the power supply, and the cables are just a bit tight. It's just hard to get them to reach. And then once I did kind of figure out that some of the cable routing could have been loosened up a little bit, it was actually just really, really hard to plug in, which is probably good because you don't want that thing coming loose. Also, there is the, on the power supply, there's a little switch that you set for your region. I'm in the US, so we have 120 volts electricity. So I set that to the 115 volt setting. For those who live in places where you have 240 volt electricity, there's a 230 volt setting. So that should be good. You really want to make sure that's set because I'm pretty sure that's how you would fry your electronics. I'm going to start this up. This is actually where I'm concerned on this being, a used product, is maybe everything was physically here, but for some reason there's an electronic defect. Maybe it won't turn on or something like that, so let's figure that out together. All right, I had to move it just to get some more space and to find a plug I could plug it into, but I'm going to turn it on. Moment of truth, fingers crossed. Let's see if it works. Oh, it's loud. The fans are spinning. I'm seeing lights and the screen's lit up. That's good. Let me just adjust the camera on this stand a little bit. Let's see how long this takes. I should probably open the manual and follow along. It's probably going to do some calibration, right? Got a little robot, says start. I'm going to touch that on the screen. I got to take the fingerprint protector, the screen protector off later. English. Okay. Oh, lets me plug in my Wi-Fi. Let me actually type in my Wi-Fi credentials really quick and get that set up. All right, nice. Connecting to Wi-Fi. That went without a hitch. Touchscreen. It's slow, but I mean, most of these devices, when they have touchscreens, they're not the fastest things. It's not as fast as your phone at all. It's going to do self-checks. I think I'm going to set up a time lapse for this because I'm pretty sure this is going to be all of like the like bed leveling and vibration test stuff. So I'm going to throw this in time lapse mode really quick. All right, I actually interrupted the process. I made a little boo-boo. I forgot to plug in one of these cables. So it's actually this right here. I'm surprised I missed that one. But it was going through calibration, and then I just noticed that this cable is not plugged in, and that would probably be why. Something could go wrong there. So let's give that another try. And I'll go back in time lapse mode. We'll see how it calibrates now that everything's actually properly plugged in. All right, looks like calibration is done. Wow, that screen is very bright. Yeah, the issue was that I actually didn't plug in the cable for this motor right here. See that yellow thing? That cable was unplugged. And so, when it was trying to do the nozzle cleaning check, which it uses like these little bristles right here, I mean, that motor is disconnected. It couldn't turn the head from side to side. So it was actually off. It was basically hanging off the edge, the extruder. And it was trying to lower to touch the nozzle against the bed, but that was never happening, so it was kind of bottoming out. I mean, it made a loud rattling sound. I'm guessing that's like the gears grinding. Hopefully, I didn't burn out any of the motors. It seemed to have finished the calibration, though, so it looks like I got lucky. When it comes down to any of these calibration processes, wow, this is very loud. I'm sorry if it's super loud. You just want to be, keeping an eye out. You want to be in the same room as it, especially if you're like a first timer. You just want to be mindful that maybe you missed something and this calibration will just kind of end up in a dead stop. Had I left it alone, I'm pretty sure I could have burned out the motors completely, and then that would have been, kind of like having to replace those parts straight away. So you just got to be careful, keep an eye on things. If it's making a really ugly sound, then I just shut it off, double check stuff, found that cable, plugged it back in, finished it up. Now it looks like it's saying we're in business. I have heard and seen from other online reviews that the bed calibration isn't super superb straight out of the box. And a lot of reviewers wanted to kind of give you an out-of-box experience, so they kind of went with it anyways. And they got some like bad beginning results, and then they would adjust it. I'm gonna just try and nip that in the bud because I don't really care about reviewing it. It's like, seems to be working. I got this thing used. I want to see if I could get into Clipper, get this thing calibrated a little bit more, run some more tests, and then kind of show you guys that process. So on to the next step. Setup is good. Everything was here. All of the parts were present. Other than my own mistakes of just like missing a little cable plug, seems to be functioning just fine. I think all the electronics are there, and if anything is fried, it's probably on me this time. So I'm gonna move on to other steps. Alright, looks like it finished its first benchy. I actually didn't use the fast benchy that they include on the USB drive. I just wanted to use kind of just the default profile from Orca Slicer because that's honestly more representative of what I would be doing in terms of the print profile anyways. So I feel like it didn't really make sense to try and just do the fast benchy. Also, I closed the cardboard box. I put the USB thing in there, so I didn't want to dig around and get it out. There is something I noticed, is that the print bed is quite warped, but I don't think that's specific to the printer I got. I think a lot of people online were talking about how the print bed is quite warped, and even auto bed leveling cannot really compensate for how warped this bed is. I was looking at the calibration profile of the height map that was made in Clipper, and yeah, this thing, it deviates quite a bit. People weren't exaggerating when they say, like, from a sort of precision perspective, the bed is quite folded up like a taco. And you could even see that as it made this purge line, it really just like kind of almost like smushed the filament straight into the print bed. When I was doing the first couple layers of this print for the time lapse, I had it actually park the head in the corner like that. For the first couple layers, you could even maybe see that line. It was quite low, and you could hear the nozzle scraping the print bed lightly. Luckily, I don't think anything got damaged or anything like that. Webcam, I got it working, didn't get it working, got it working. It seemed to be kind of like an on and off thing where I just restarted it and it picked it up, and that was kind of it. But during this print, I wasn't able to view it, maybe because it was doing some of the time-lapse stuff. So maybe I should just try and set up my phone for short time lapses, set up a camera on a tripod for longer ones, and just use the onboard webcam for things like print monitoring or something like that. This is the benchy. I'm going to let it cool down. I didn't use a brim or anything like that with the default profile. I felt like it wasn't going fast enough. It took 38 minutes, but it was pausing every layer to take the screenshot for the time lapse. So I think it would have actually only taken about 32 minutes on the default settings, but I wanted to see what the time lapse would look like with the built-in webcam. Hopefully that renders out. All right, looks like it's cooled down now. Wow, even at idle, that power supply fan is quite loud. Hopefully my phone could cancel that out. This little strand right here, I think that's from it constantly pulling away for the time-lapse shot. It was just centering the nozzle and centering the print bed so that the camera kind of had a consistent position of the print. I did mainly just try and get the bed mesh leveling to look good, but I actually haven't done any of the other calibrations yet. I feel like going through the whole suite of Orca Slicer calibration tests will get this looking a lot better. You could see, if I catch on the light, there's some waviness there. I didn't really inspect things like first layer and stuff like that. I feel like it could be better. I feel like maybe it was a bit squished in there, but you can see the lettering and stuff like that. I didn't need a brim or anything like that. I think a lot of people are trying to like really push the limits, especially what a bed slinger can do of whipping around the print as fast as they can to get those faster print times. But I feel like the default settings leaves you with some pretty good bed adhesion. That obviously is going to change with like larger and taller prints, and that problem would, I feel like, only get worse as the prints get taller and get larger. And this is a sort of medium size to larger size printer, especially compared to something like the Flashforge I have underneath the table here. So I kind of would like to keep it at those sort of default, more or less medium high speeds and not really push it, because at the end of the day, I don't really want to risk print failures just from trying to shave off however much time printing at the very fastest speed can get me. Something to note is that this the sheet, the PEI sheet, it's like maybe I'm just not used to these black PEI sheets as opposed to kind of like the gold one. I'm trying to remember if this one even came with the Flashforge. I mean, first of all, it's smaller, but this like gold powder coat, it feels a lot smoother in comparison than this. This is a little bit more gritty, and I don't think that's going to be an issue for the printing, but when I was wiping it down, I washed it just to get rid of any oils and stuff that either came from my hands or from the factory or whatever. And also, when I went over it with a cloth after getting some isopropyl alcohol on it, it did catch little fibers of the paper towel, of the little like alcohol wipe I was using and stuff like that. And that could have left like, you know, tiny little fibers in it. It just felt a little bit more gritty, and it was catching on to those fibers a little bit. So that's something where maybe, I don't know if it would do that to a microfiber cloth or anything like that, but it's just kind of something that I noticed. I don't know if that's necessarily good or bad, but yeah, something to take note. Okay, yeah, so it seems like the time lapse is pretty good. I'm wondering if that's going to be a persistent thing where I can either use the time lapse feature with the camera or monitor the webcam live. I mean, that might just be like a technical limitation. Hey, this is editor Tyler. Just chiming in that you're probably not going to see a lot of the time lapses of some of the early stuff, mainly because I went on a little bit of a side quest, kind of tinkering around with the software of the SV06 plus Ace. Um, and that led to me actually uninstalling and reinstalling Clipper and a couple other pieces inside of the printer, mainly because I was trying to get the Obico printer like monitoring, like cloud solution software where you get like AI monitoring of your prints, and so it could kind of like detect failures and let you know and stuff like that, as well as let you like sort of access the printer's webcam through the app, so you could kind of remotely monitor and stuff. And it was just giving me some really strange errors. Maybe that was an issue of trying to self-host the server and things like that. At the end of the day, I have a Raspberry Pi that's running Octo everywhere, and so I was able to add this printer and reinstall Clipper and Moonraker and reconfigure things to get it all working again. But it did mean that I lost the time lapses of some of the original prints, like the Benchy and stuff like that. But I have other time lapses to bring in. So, yeah. This printer, I know it doesn't have like a full gigabyte of RAM. I mean, it has 4 times the amount of RAM as the control board on the Adventure 5M, which is why the Adventure 5M's version of Clipper is so pared back, which is why I modified it. You can see that I modified that software. But I hope that was just like one of those weird one-off things where I just need to refresh the page or something. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do more calibration. That's basically like all this like sort of included tiny roll of filament would be mostly good for. And do like basically run it through the full suite of Orca Slicer calibration tests, get all the math checked out, go over the parts again. But I am going to be doing that with the printer inside of this humongous enclosure. okay, which is like bigger than the entire table. That's it, basically pressed up against the wall outlet. So that's it's humongous. I mean, the printer's pretty big itself and it's tall. Um, but I wanted to get it in there. Number one, because the thing's loud. It's going to reduce the noise. Number two, because it'll be easier to move it while I've kind of already gotten stuff moved around anyways. Number three, just to get it in the environment. I know technically when you're printing materials like PLA, PETG, you don't need an enclosure. Number one, I don't really want to be exposing like the fumes and stuff to me or the cat right here. Allow to say hi. And also this is like my computer's right here where I'm working. So if I'm just like sitting here doing some work for a couple hours and the printer's running, better to kind of isolate that. I could get it. There's a vent for this enclosure. I could kind of run out the window if I really need to. Thirdly, yeah, I haven't had issues with printing PLA, PLA Pro, PETG inside of at least the sort of 3D printed enclosure mod that you do for the 85M in order to more or less just make it feel a little bit more polished. There's a bit of a darker shot here, but you can see these are 3D printed panels. I never actually opened this top area to vent it, even though it definitely would improve cooling for PLA. I've never really had issues with it, never had to really print with the door open. Honestly, preventing drafts seems to be more important for that kind of stuff anyways. So it's gonna live in here. It's probably gonna be zipped up. I'm gonna have to figure out a way to get in filament that doesn't have to come onto the spool holder here, but maybe it could come out of the filament dryer that I have and feeds into the enclosure and things like that. What's nice about this though is I think that webcam is always really starved for light. I think the ISO is really cranked, so it's the video coming from the webcam built in is just really noisy and grainy. Even though it's 720p, it's like shouldn't be that bad. But also this enclosure comes with an LED strip, which should help give it a lot of nice lighting as well. So I'm gonna take care of that, and then we'll see how that goes. Yeah, alrighty, it's sitting in there. I was afraid for a second that this huge enclosure wasn't big enough because I scooted the bed back and forth in here and the cables were kind of touching that back wall, and then I scooted it forward and it kind of was peeking out of the door. But after kind of just figuring out the cable routing and stuff, it actually is it's looking pretty good. It's looking really solid. Yeah, and the you can see the LED bar. That is so nice, and you'll see in the time lapses that the webcam benefits greatly from it. It's still, it's not perfect, but I think if I were to monitor prints, it's kind of nice not having to just point a lamp on a stand into the print chamber. And the fact that this is, I guess they claim that this material lining the inside of this little enclosure is fireproof, but it's also just really reflective light-wise, so that's bouncing a lot of light around, so you're not getting any weird harsh shadows like I would get from just like pointing a singular light source at the printer. And there's even the little LED camera that's built into the or the LED light that's built into the camera right there. So yeah, plenty of light, should look good. It is on right now, and some of that idle fan noise it's just kind of buffeted. I'm actually not worried, or I'm not annoyed by the loud power supply fan. It's loud, but it's not whiny. On the other hand, the control board that has a smaller fan, and while it's maybe not as loud, has a high-pitched whine to it. So we'll see when the printer's heating up and stuff like that, when it's actually doing work, whether that whininess will cut through the enclosure. People have modded and just added aftermarket fans. They're not very expensive, that are a lot quieter. I think Noctua makes fans that are comparable to these fans that probably offer better performance as well, but are just more quiet in general. So there might be something where I do that in like another time, as like a sort of like how to upgrade and aftermarket and make this like give it the kind of creature comforts you'd want just kind of for everyday use. But I think getting this guy in the enclosure was the right move. This enclosure is still humongous, but the printer's humongous, so I think it kind of justifies the space. It is kind of weird having this sitting in the floor of my office. I mean, I got this printer sitting on the floor of the office, but it's able to be tucked underneath the table. This enclosure is taller than the table. It goes further away from the wall than the table. Some of these side doors, which are just storage closets, like especially this closet over here, like you wouldn't be able to open the door. Whereas this table, there's enough clearance where you could open the door, you could get in and get stuff. But with this enclosure, if this was up against that same corner, it would just it would just be massively in the way. So I mean, luckily this space by the window is doing just fine. And yeah, so it's time to get calibrating. And we'll kind of see how things go. This glass, it's not glass. It's just like a transparent, like tent. Basically, it's like a little window that I'd see in like a kid's play tent. So I'll get started on the calibrating. We'll calibrate like for input shaping and stuff like that, as through like Orca Slicer's tests, and really calibrate stuff so that the Orca Slicer profile has like proper like pressure advance, like flow control, and all of that good stuff. So I'm gonna run those, and we'll see how that goes. All right, so it's been, for the most part of a week, with the Sovol SV06 Ace Plus, and I've managed to run a handful of prints, and I'm kind of gonna just go through that a little bit and what my experience has been kind of as like first time using this printer, and I'm gonna show you some of like the tests and the models and stuff on this turntable, which was actually also printed on the SV06, and kind of going through my thoughts, and comparing and contrasting against the Flashforge Adventure 5M, kind of doing a comparison of what I like about this printer and what the Flashforge really benefited from. And then talking about kind of how I compare these and what I'm looking for in printers, because that might not be the same thing that you want. You might actually be better off with the Flashforge instead of the SV06, depending on what you're kind of looking for when you're getting into something like 3D printing. Okay, so there's these two benchies. One of them was with the sample PLA on the left there that came with the printer, and then on the right is actually white PETG from ELEGOO. It's actually the spool that's mounted currently on the printer, and all the models in orange is actually printed with PLA Pro from Inland, from the Micro Center brand. And I mean, everything just kind of turns out default fine. I think in general, that's kind of how everything comes out of the box. Is you'll set it up for the first time, it'll go through its calibration, and then it'll print everything at a totally acceptable level. And I wanted to do more calibration to see what I could bring out of that, so I'm going to turn over to the temperature towers. And so here you could see the sample PLA's temperature tower versus the PETG. And actually this PETG temperature tower is what I just most recently printed, just because I realized I hadn't really dialed in the temperature for what should be good for the PETG, and you'll see that with some of the other kinds of prints I did. And you can see here that there's a little bit of a clog that got dislodged there really early on in the process. I think there was actually just a bit of filament in the hot end when I first got it, and it was probably just some black PLA that they just did just to make sure that it works. And yeah, in terms of like this test, just seeing which temperature works best for the filament, I mean, that's not really a test of the printer itself. It's more just trying to figure out how to get your filament going, so not much to comment on that. Obviously the bed and the extruder could get to the right temperatures for printing, you know, even more advanced materials than just like the basic PLA and PETG. And I don't really have much to comment on the performance of the hot end or the performance of the cooling, frankly. Again, pretty serviceable. Here's where you start to see a discrepancy in the materials, and here's where I ran out of the sample and started using the PLA Pro, and that's why this test is orange. This is the like kind of tolerance test, and after some tuning, the PLA Pro did really well. This is something that would have taken a little bit more tuning on the Flashforge printer as well, is getting the tolerance to actually work all the way down to the 0.5 millimeter level. And on the PETG side of things, I think PETG just doesn't have that same dimensional accuracy. It does work fine at 0.2 millimeters on the test, but I'll have to do more tuning to get the dimensional accuracy of the holes with like XY hole compensation and Orca slicer to get that to the same level as something like PLA. Even though this is showing really clear tolerance performance, like it works with PETG at 0.2 millimeters here, actually when I was sort of trying to design a functional handle for this turntable, I had tried to print this to rotate and print in place. And I gave it much larger clearances than 0.2 millimeters. And it still fused. So this little handle of this like crank basically doesn't rotate in place. It's fused. So it could be just because of the way that I designed the internal structure or the way that I gave it those clearances in FreeCAD. But that's something that I'm going to look into more. I'm going to maybe just give it a huge gap to see if I could get it to print in place at all, or to see if there's something just going on with the geometry of the shape that I was making. So yeah, that's a little bit on the tolerances when it comes to something like PETG, like a little bit of a tougher material. This I did not print in all of the materials, but I just kind of wanted to see, again, checking those tolerances. This back spike, I actually bumped that after it printed. All of this printed fine. And another thing to note, and this is maybe me not being a good scientist in terms of testing and being consistent, is that I really wanted to get the tool head to park for each frame of the time lapses, so that you don't get like a jittering tool head, or so the bed isn't flickering back and forth. I just find that just not so visually pleasing when I'm putting up time lapses. I guess while I'm talking about all these things, I'll be putting up the time lapses of each test. So you can see lots of artifacting on the tower, especially that center spike right there. That's definitely more of an artifact of me parking the tool head to take time lapse pictures, rather than kind of a demonstration of the test itself. Which, I mean, for these things, I'm not too worried about this sort of aesthetic finish. But you actually see for PETG, the bridging, the overhangs did pretty darn good. And I know I am not a master of all of the parameters of Orca Slicer, and I haven't done a lot to change it. And maybe these settings weren't quite optimal for all of this. The divider is just like the VFA tower test in Orca Slicer. And on this, like a lot of these tests, the experience was I ran them, and then I didn't really, I wasn't super confident into seeing artifacts at certain levels where they're saying, hey, measure up to this. And if you start seeing some sort of drop in quality, that kind of lets you know where the limits of your printer are. It seemed like for the most part, like the printer did pretty well, or like somewhere in the firmware settings, they played it pretty safe so that the printer's limits wouldn't start to show its cracks. And I'm totally fine with that, because these tests are really geared for people who, well, if you're building something like a Voron where you're basically building the printer from scratch, you really just need to dial in like all of the base level stuff. But with all these kind of manufactured printers that have the base level stuff tuned pretty well, this would really be more for eking out just that top end performance, maybe getting just that extra speed for those who want to, get those like 10-minute benchies printed and stuff like that. But again, like I said, this printer, very comparable in speed to the Adventurer 5M, so I wasn't worried about that. And I feel like those gains in tuning could be made up for with kind of add-ons or modifications done to the printer on the other end of things that isn't the software hardware, like a larger hardened nozzle or something like that, or a different print bed surface and things like that, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But the next thing I want to show is not just these sort of test prints, but some prints that I've actually done for myself practically. I mean, the first one is the turntable, and like I said, like you could see that it works. The clearances on the PETG do not let me freely turn this. There's still just enough resistance that when I turn it, it slips out to the side. I'm not really able to finish the rotation, but that's okay. That could be more of a design thing. This was somebody else's design. I'll link it in the description, but I did remix it to give it more of this crank style handle because it had like a knob in the original design. So that was something that took a little bit, and that was more of the largest object I had printed. I don't feel like I have quite literally taken advantage of this large build volume, since it's significantly larger than the Adventurer 5M. But I did want to do some other prints that I found to have enjoyed. This is one that I designed. This is for the like the little Valentine's Day contest on printables.com. So I thought that this would be kind of cool to run off. And this is great. The original design was huge, but I didn't want to take the time to print something that was twice as big as this, even though that's kind of what this printer benefits from. So yeah, just like something that I designed that we could print. And then here is another thing. This one I'll also link because this is somebody else's design, is a controller stand that lets you use the GameSir Cyclone Pro 2, if that's the right name. Lets you use the pogo pins on the stand. So if I could do this one-handed behind the camera, right, the controller just plops on right here, and those pogo pins are attached. So now this is where I'm going to really talk about the SV06. Is I think this white PETG is a really brutal test in showing you surface imperfections, and I'm halfway tempted to print stuff off with the Flashforge just to see if these same imperfections would come off. I mean, it's not a apples to apples comparison, but I do have another print of this same model. Here, let me just go and grab it. In the orange PLA Pro. So it's a different material, and also the Flashforge has the that 0.6 millimeter hardened steel nozzle already mounted to it, so it's even a different nozzle diameter. But you could see maybe this is just a benefit of it being orange versus it being white, and also this being printed at a different layer height. I'm pretty sure, if my memory serves correctly, this was at 0.18 millimeters of layer height. The details look a little bit finer, and some of those blemishes that show up really egregiously on the white PETG are just a little bit more concealed. I mean, it's still not perfect, but you could really, you're catching reflections. Let's see if I could even get it to focus. You catch like the reflections of all of these wavy lines and sort of little artifacts on the white. So I think it could just be a consequence that white filament will just show off these reflections and shadows of imperfections a lot more. But it could just be that this printer isn't quite tuned in. And that's like kind of the big deal. And that's like a really big comparison point between something like the Sovol printers versus something that comes out of Flashforge. I'm not really going to compare it against like a Bamboo Lab printer because those tend to be more in the premium segment. For sort of these prices, like this price point. And I mean, I also need to factor in the fact that I bought this used from Amazon Warehouse, even though it didn't technically seem to have actually been used. It seemed like it was returned before the original owner had even opened it. And so the value proposition is like a little bit different. But here's the thing, kind of philosophically, and you've probably seen this if you've looked at other reviews for something like the SV06 in comparison to something in the same price category as the Flashforge 85M, is this feels like a DIY project. And these sorts of the artifacts and the things that aren't making the print super fantastic is something you could DIY yourself or the printer into improving. And I could be doing more tests and going into Orca Slicer and dialing in those settings, and I kind of have been. And that's really been a refreshing part of working with this thing. I think some people would find it frustrating, and that's where you are in that part of the Venn diagram where you would much rather go with the Flashforge, where you can use Orca Slicer, and Flashforge has a bunch of presets pretty dialed in. Again, it probably gets you like B+, A- quality prints right from the preset. And they even have the preset already for PETG. They have the preset for TPU, and things like that. And you could kind of see in the disparity of quality between these two prints where the SV06 needs more TLC. Is that I think its default profile handles PLA really well, but as soon as you venture off onto your own thing and say, I want to do PETG, or if I wanted to use this enclosure and do ASA printing or TPU, or like an engineering filament, then I have to set off on my own adventure and tune up my own preset. And that's a lot of work. But it's something that I feel like is part of the process. And I feel like it makes me understand this machine better as I work with it. And that could be something that you're looking for as somebody who's interested in just 3D printing, or you could be looking for just end results and just getting that A- without thinking too hard about it. So now, this is where I weigh in kind of more personally about my opinion of comparing this against the Flashforge from a sort of usability standpoint. Is I modded the Flashforge. I mean, the enclosure mod that you see here with the doors, the metal door, the magnetic doors, and clipper running in headless mode. Those are all because I wanted to have more control over the printer. I wanted to be able to remotely monitor it. I wanted to be able to record time lapses. I wanted to try and use different features of Clipper that aren't present in Flashforge's sort of prepackaged, kind of software reduced version of Clipper, like their sort of Clipper Lite. And I wanted to use just stock Orca Slicer and not have any issues with that. And this printer, I will just say, the Flashforge, here, let me keep the camera on the printer I'm talking about. It's not built for that. And I've definitely felt resistance every step of the way of doing this, and that's why ultimately, even though this is a great printer for a lot of people, and a lot of people have loved it, and it's definitely served me well when I use it for what it's made for, it's not the one for me, mainly because even though I have removed the GUI from the screen to try and save on computing power, with this Clipper mod installed on this printer, it basically just about every third print just freezes up on you. It just spits out an error, and that's not to blame the software, the people who are making the Clipper mod or anything like that. It's just totally just a community based thing, and they're basically reverse engineering the printer. But in doing so, it's really revealed how lackluster the sort of computing power inside of this device is. I think the biggest thing that's affecting this printer's performance is the fact that it has 128 megabytes of memory of RAM. And so when you use the webcam, which is they sell a webcam for it, and you try and monitor your prints and you try and do things like time lapses, it just can't handle it. And that's just kind of strange that they would sell this add-on and then it doesn't really have the horsepower to fully utilize it. And that just makes me feel a little bit odd about this device. It makes me confused as to what this device is trying to be. It seems like it's trying to aim for that kind of out-of-the-box experience where it's like you just stick on the camera, it will kind of take care of itself, and the presets are taken care of, and you don't have to worry about it. But it actually kind of ends up feeling like a little bit of a kneecapped experience where it's like, yeah, you should probably use the Orca Flashforge fork. You should use the stock firmware that is very limited and doesn't give you the same capabilities as just stock Clipper. Stick to what they've laid out for you and use it to that sort of A- ability. And that's just something where that just doesn't interest me. There's a lot of printers where at the same price point, I think you could get instead of an A- with that sort of philosophy, you could get like an A+. And yeah, so that's where I really gravitate towards. Back to the SV06, it is open to its benefit and to its detriment. But what's nice is you could overcome the detriments by the nature of it being open. I mean, this has 512 megabytes of RAM. I think a lot of people's complaint about like the sort of horsepower in the computing power is that it probably should come with a gig, and then you really don't have to worry. But what's been nice about this is I've been able to run multi-hour prints. I feel like I could run a print off of this that utilizes this full build volume that would take a day, say something like a full-size helmet. And I don't think, like, I'm pretty confident I could do that and it won't throw some Clipper error or something that like freezes it up. Maybe there could be like the print falls over or something like that, but that hasn't been something I've necessarily experienced. And then if something really does feel from a hardware perspective insufficient, there's lots of ways to kind of improve on that. So let me actually move on to that, and how I'm going to address probably two of my biggest gripes with the SV06 plus Ace is, number one, the MCU fan, the motherboard fan, so on this side, that box on the right, is very whiny. It's probably just like a really cheap fan. A lot of people probably complain about the power supply fan, which you're hearing running right now. Oh my gosh, my cat just scared me. It just jumped on the table. What are you doing up there? Okay. The power supply fan, yes, it's loud, but what's I think more bothersome is when a fan is quite whiny. And I think I've already shown that in other clips. If not, I'll record a little bit and then you can kind of hear what it's like when that mainboard fan spins up. Secondly is, I think I talked about a little bit of a clog in the nozzle during this heat test, and you could even see more artifacts from that if I remove this. On this turntable itself, it seemed to have gotten some filament stuck in it and kind of just like spat it out at some point. I think there was literally a chunk of like a burnt clog that actually did end up coming out onto the print. I was like, okay, cool. So I just like kind of picked it and threw it in the trash. So that 0.4 millimeter nozzle, I mean, it's just something that I would like to upgrade to a 0.6 millimeter nozzle. This is a little bit of a nitpick that the Sovol nozzles are like just different enough from like kind of the more commonplace like dimensions that it is a little bit hard to find one that is just kind of out of the box compatible. The Creality nozzles are like really, really close, but like a millimeter too short. And I think people are putting like E3D Volcano nozzles on the extruder for this, and like the sort of cooling setup means that it's not cooling it as effectively for things like bridges and whatnot. But I did find kind of a solution for both of those things. Here is a nozzle that I am pretty confident is actually the same dimensions. This is from Durozzle, and it is advertised. You can even see it there, SV08. But when looking at it, I think the Amazon listing did say it's also compatible with the SV06, SV06 Ace A lot of stuff does not say it's compatible with the Ace Plus yet, but when I did some research, it seemed like this hot end was actually the exact same between the both. So that's going to handle, first of all, this is going to be a hardened tungsten carbide nozzle, which is going to be cool if I wanted to print something abrasive. And also just last a bit longer. But then that 0.6 millimeter nozzle will give me a lot more confidence to just print large things, because that flow means I could finish prints faster. So like in terms of something big that takes a long time, it kind of cuts down on that time and gives me time back just by having that larger nozzle. And then secondly is getting a tiny fan that will replace the one in the motherboard, basically. So this is just a Noctua fan. I didn't know they made fans this small. Like if I open this guy up, this fan is just super cute. I thought this was like just like a picture of the fan, and then I looked and this is actually the entire fan itself, like holding it up to the nozzle. It's not much taller than it. So that's really adorable. And it seems like it has a cable that adapts from this. I guess this fan has 4 pins, and the MCU, like the pins for the fan, is only 2, but there's an adapter cable in this. So that was pretty dope to find out. So that's something that I'm probably going to do for another video if people enjoyed watching this video and hearing my thoughts. I made this video, I mean, I like 3D printing, but I made this video because I found a good deal on this printer. Like I said, it was listed for $200 and I had this $50 Amazon gift card. So I got this printer effectively for half off. And what it was like, kind of getting something used and then being pleasantly surprised and being really lucky that it basically wasn't used at all. And then secondly, there's not a lot of coverage of this specific printer. And it kind of felt like it would be a good idea to get more thoughts on this. There's lots of reviews of the SV06 Ace, which is the regular size kind of refresh that came out last year. It's 2026 now. But I was like trying to do some research because the price was like pretty good, and then the used price was like kind of too good to pass up. And I was just trying to do tons and tons of research and just look for review videos and stuff like that. I'm kind of that person that really wants to be informed with my buying decision. And there was like a lot of risk and anxiety that came with this because there wasn't a lot of content about this printer. And so I wanted to kind of provide that for other people who are looking for this printer. I guess it's also because it came out so recently, and I think so many people covered the SV06 Ace, they didn't really feel the need to cover the Ace Plus to see, like, they thought, you know, it's basically the same thing but bigger. But, like, who knows? And how does that relate to compatibility? Like I said, this is listed as compatible with the SV06 Ace, but does that also mean that this should work with the Ace Plus? We're going to find out. I guess, like, kind of one concluding thought on this printer, and this is especially in relation to the context of the Flashforge printer, is the Flashforge is a Core XY, and, you know, I've printed that enclosure for it. You could see that, and that, I mean, other than the fact that it's a smaller printer, just makes it packaged really nicely, and that's definitely a plus. This Flashforge, before I had moved it, it was sitting on top of this table, and it was just fine right there. Maybe noise-wise, it was just about the same as this thing. This guy, I just, like, forgot, because my first printer was, like, a King Rune. It was a bed slinger as well. Like, bed slingers, they just kind of look like they have a lot more bits dangling off of them. Like, there's just a lot more cables. And when I was putting this thing together and then putting it inside this enclosure, I was kind of worried, especially as this thing moves back, this cable colliding with the back of the tent or getting snagged underneath and stuff like that. It just looks less put together. I think that's just the nature of how wires need to run for bed slingers. There's just more moving elements in different positions. But that hasn't been an issue. Someone had uploaded a model on Printables for a strain cable to keep this guy upright because it is sagging a little bit. So I might add that on. But yeah, it's all super well thought out. Like, it just isn't the prettiest looking printer. Like it's not a just an enclosed box where everything more or less feels self-contained. Like even like trying to get this whole thing in frame has not been my priority. But yeah, it looks like a science experiment. It definitely doesn't win any sort of aesthetic awards, especially as something like that's like around the house. Um, so yeah, that's my first impression so far. I'm definitely gonna still be following up on this thing because I'm wondering how it holds up in the long term, um, and kind of keep thoughts going about that. Uh, Let me know if you guys would like to see a video about adding these modifications to help them out, or if you have any other ideas for like modifying or improving this thing, or if you just have any questions about it so I can try and answer them. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Hope to see you guys in the next one. Hey, post editing Tyler here to just say that thank you guys for watching this video. This is a really long one. I didn't expect to go over an hour long. Secondly is I've never done this before, but I've created affiliate links for all of the products that were featured in this video, and they're down in the description. If you want to check out any of these products, I get a kickback if you use the link. Just be careful to not have like the honey extension or something swiping up the affiliate. Last but not least, I gotta say, like and subscribe, all that good stuff as a content creator. It's gonna be interesting seeing this channel come back after such a long hiatus. I'm curious as to see what the algorithm's gonna do about that. If it's gonna just see this channel as dead, or if it's gonna bring it back and surfaces it. So stats like that will let me look at the graphs and see what's going on. But yeah, thanks for watching.